We created a monetization timeline that tells you exactly what steps to take at each stage of your podcast growth journey in order to build a consistent revenue engine. We're going to take you through each stage of growth from 0 views to 20,000 plus and tell you exactly what we would do to maximize revenue and the potential of our show. These are the same strategies we've used to build 6-figure revenues for our podcast clients. We go far beyond just selling ads and dive into all the different ways you can make money with podcasts. By the end, you'll know exactly how to turn your podcast into a profitable, long-term business without any of the guesswork.
Welcome to Podcast Support, the show where we tackle the questions every podcaster needs answered to grow a successful show. Whether you're just starting out or scaling an existing audience, we break down the roadblocks, share practical strategies, and give you step-by-step answers so you can spend less time guessing and more time building the podcast you want.
Thank you for contacting Podcast Support.
All right, Michael. So when we're looking at building a podcast and we're looking at that 0 to 1,000 listener or follower range, what are those things that we want to be doing right then to be making sure that we're setting ourselves up for revenue down the line?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely say that this stage of the timeline is really all about community building and validation. Because we want to make sure that we're not only, proving that people are actually interested in this podcast and interested in what we have to say about our topic, but also making sure that we're actually collecting the information of our viewers that are interested and getting them to more places than just Spotify and YouTube.
Yeah, what I like to think about at this stage is hypothesis. You want to be coming up with a lot of hypotheses about what your audience wants and what's going to lure them or draw them to action. You want to be creating a lot of new lead magnets. You want to be trying things out with your newsletter. You want to be doing all of these different things and making guesses and taking risks, because right now is the time where you're going to identify who your audience is and what they're looking for from a show like you. The assumption should not be, hey, I've made the structure of this and this is the way it's going to be. Like, I'm doing an interview podcast and I'm going to start out with this type of question and then it's going to go into this type of question. Those are things that come later on once you've done that trial and error period. So really that validation, I think, is just one of those really important things that sometimes gets missed or underutilized. And then community building. Wow, is this a great opportunity to start that community building? Because this is going to be where you build those lifelong fans or those people who are going to be your greatest evangelist. And the ways that you can do that are making sure that you have your sales funnel built out at this stage. One of the worst things that can happen is that you have your podcast and suddenly another creator finds it and they go and they tell the whole world about you, and suddenly you get an episode where you get, I was just talking to somebody and he has 30,000 followers on or subscribers on YouTube, and he got that from one video that got 26 million views on it. And so he got this huge influx. But now if you look, he only gets 200 views on each episode, and it was because he wasn't ready to maximize on that experience. And so I think that that's something that you really want to be making sure that you're looking out for, which is when you finally get that video that hits, that catches on like wildfire, that you're actually able to take that influx and execute on it. And so the ways that you got to look out for that is that you need to launch a newsletter. Even if you're not posting all the time on that newsletter, make the challenge to yourself of posting once a month. It doesn't have to be the most revolutionary newsletter. It just has to be, about what you're passionate about. But launch that newsletter, create that community area, whether that's on Discord, that could be a Facebook group, that could be on a platform I was just hearing about, School, which is another platform out there.
Yeah, Alex Hormozi's platform.
Yeah. There's so many different platforms that you can utilize to bring people together. And you don't want to just count on YouTube being your central hub. You want it to be a place with all of these other spokes around working together.
And another really important aspect of this stage is that we don't want to be asking too many things from our audience. We want to be offering a lot of value, not asking them to do things for us. So for example, when we launch our newsletter, we want to be offering a free lead magnet in exchange for the person signing up for the newsletter. So they're getting something out of it. They're not just doing us a favor by signing up.
You need to be really specific about your target audience at this stage. And that again comes back to that validation a little bit, but it's about you might have an idea of who your target audience is, and you start creating videos for them, and you suddenly start to see that there's this whole other audience that you weren't anticipating who is engaging with all of your content. And so this is one of those opportunities where you need to be specific about your target audience, but you also need to be a little bit flexible and welcoming in new people who you might have never anticipated being a part of it.
You might start a podcast about playing guitar and think that it's going to really appeal to seasoned guitar players, and then find out that your content is really popular amongst beginner guitar players. So you don't want to be making like all your decisions about what your entire business is going to be structured around if you're going to be thinking that it's all going to be seasoned guitar players, and then suddenly now you've got this different audience you weren't anticipating. So there's so much you can learn about your audience and who your content resonates with at this stage.
Yeah, I was watching, I've gotten really into woodcutting videos
Yeah.
and like table making videos. And there was a comment on there of somebody who has Asperger's who finds those videos really comforting
Okay.
because there is just a lot of concise information being conveyed and like a really relaxing way that those types of YouTubers present their information. And so, like if you're really focused on this one area, you might miss those opportunities to engage with a totally different side of the YouTube whole community that you could be capturing and bringing into your audience and under your umbrella, which I think is just a really valuable thing to be thinking about at this stage, which is all about growth and identifying who you are within the YouTube sphere.
Yeah. And then the very last thing that I'd say for the 0 to 1,000 view stage of the timeline is that if you want to be making some extra money, affiliate marketing, like those Amazon links where you get paid a little bit if somebody buys a product through your link, can be a really powerful way to get a little bit of extra money every time that you recommend a tool, a book, or a service to somebody else, or talk about it on your show or in your social media. So affiliate links can be a good way to just like generate a little bit of revenue at this stage.
Yeah.
But
It's not ever going to be your main driver, but at this stage, it's something that puts money in your account, and that's invaluable at this stage. And it's also, one of the things I always recommend to creators is to take that money that you make at this early stage and reinvest it in the show. And that means in advertising the show, that means in providing a better value to your audience. Like, it's always good when starting a business to make sure that as much of that profit as you can make goes straight back into it.
and also you can be collecting data at this stage of how many click-throughs you're getting on those affiliate links, how much traffic you're driving to these products, how many sales you're driving. So like that's really powerful metrics that you can use in the future for your own business or for pitching your podcast to advertisers at later stages in the timeline. So the next stage in our monetization timeline is the 1,000 to 5,000 viewer section. And in this stage, our main focus, we want to be focusing on our very first revenue streams and also collecting data about our audience so we can make more informed decisions in the future. You're going to get a theme with us about collecting data and understanding your audience. This is a really big thing with us.
Yeah, it's incredibly important, and it's the way that you justify your ad dollars coming in. So, things to be looking out for, ways to be making revenue at this point are Patreon or Substack or additional paywalled content. It's taking that community that you've been building and turning them into a paying audience. And there's definitely a multitude of different services out there that you can utilize, but it all comes back to that you need to be finding new ways to be providing value, because that's what's important here is that whether it's Patreon or Substack or any of those, people are only going to sign up for that if there's some type of added value that they can't get elsewhere on the rest of your channel. And
Like we said earlier, we don't want our audience doing favors for us. They're not going to just sign up because they want to give us a couple extra bucks a month. They're signing up because they are getting something in return for their money here.
yeah, and to be honest, I think it is true that people won't just give you money because of that, but they do understand that you're a creator who is making this content for free, and so there are ways that you can get them to buy into who you are and the show that you create. One of those that I think is like a good example of that I've been watching recently is um what's it called? Kill Count. Kill Count is this YouTube channel where they count all the kills in horror films. But one of the things that happens is because they're showing those types of, they're showing horror films, they have to end up blurring a lot of like the like gross out, like bloody content. And so they have a paid level of like $1 a month where you can get access to a version of the video that shows all the gory
Oh, that's
kills.
actually cool. I like that.
And it's a good one because one, it's not that much of a different hard work for them. They just take off the blur filters, but they also make it a little bit about like being against YouTube a little bit of like, hey, we have to censor this and it's not our decision. It's that YouTube is forcing us to censor this. So pay us $1 so you can show support of these horror films and like the thing that you love. And you can be a part of a community of people who also want to see these gory kills. And so I just think it's always a good thing of like get people on your side and get them to understand where you're coming from within this YouTube ecosystem.
Yeah, my favorite example of this is actually the YouTuber Technology Connections.
Hmm.
He makes really in detailed videos about just like everyday home appliances and how they work. And he's had a ton of Patreon subscribers that have been with him for like years and years and years. He runs
Yeah.
the list at the very end of his videos, and the same names have been popping up there for a really long time. And he just offers additional conversations and additional content on his Patreon, and people absolutely love it.
Yep. Absolutely. So that's definitely a huge way. And then you look at those tiers. So you have those easy ones that are just things that, take you only a slight bit of work, but bring in, that's going to be a large majority of your Patreon subscribers or people at those lower tiers. But then you have bigger things like you have like giveaways, or you have getting the video early. One of the ones that I like is for Succession, the TV show. There's this podcast that's all about breaking down and analyzing Succession. I mean, not Succession, Severance.
Oh, Severance.
It's all about breaking down Severance. And that podcast, he has a whole Patreon where people are doing research with him and like they're watching early versions of the video or the podcast and like providing feedback on it and being like, hey, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense, rework this. And so he literally has this team of paid volunteers who help him build out these episodes
That's
because
interesting.
it gives them a place to talk about the show itself. And like that is something where, it's number one, a great work on him to get that type of help and stuff. But like he has given people who wanted a community, a place and a community, and it's worth that paid feature to have access to it.
Yeah. I think that this brings up like a really important point in creating these Patreons or Substacks, is that you don't want to be taking things that are already part of your current free podcast and then moving them behind a paywall, because that's just taking things away from your free viewers, and we don't want to be alienating those people at all. We want them to always feel like they're getting everything they should be. We want to be adding additional content, things that are additive to the experience of watching your podcast behind this paywall. We never want it to feel like we're taking things away and locking it away from people.
Yeah, it should never be things that feel like they should be part of your main offering that are behind a paywall. Doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel good, and it also makes people feel like, well, what's the point of anything that like I can't actually enjoy this channel because I'm missing a quintessential part of it.
And then a few final things we can be doing during this stage of our podcast growth are paid guest spots. You definitely want to be careful about these, but there are people who will pay to be on podcasts that expose them to 1,000 to 5,000 people per episode.
Hmm.
And we want to make sure that we're only offering these spots to aligned experts or brands that we think our audience is going to really connect with. We
Yeah.
definitely don't want our show to start feeling like a commercial. So this is something to be very careful and reasonable about.
One of the things that I really think like throw caution to this is if you're going to do it, make sure that that guest understands that they cannot come on and just pimp out their product and try to take over the show as just advertising who they are. And don't ask questions that just advertise who they are. Don't ask fluff leading questions that are like, what has your business been doing and why is it so great? Because your audience doesn't care about that and they certainly don't want to watch it. So instead, what you want to be focusing on doing is offering value still and making sure that your questions are aligned with the pain points of your audience and what they want to be learning about.
And back to data collection, we want to make sure that, especially as we're reaching the higher end of this 1 to 5,000 views uh, section of the timeline, that we're running surveys, because 3, 4, 5,000 answers to a survey can give us some really powerful data. Surveys are not quite as important when we're only getting 50 or 60 answers. That really doesn't tell us that much about trends. It just tells us like a smattering of people's opinions.
Yeah, what I always like to think though is that if you have them at that early stage and you keep the survey consistent, that you're going to be getting in more and more people so you can build up better answers over time. You
Yeah.
always have to adjust for the fact that trends or things like that change, but that you are trying to understand who your audience is. So don't make like a giant change to your show because 1 to 20 people say something, but it's always good to get that information early and start growing out that data sheet.
Yeah. But around the 3 to 5,000 point is when you want to make sure that like you're definitely running surveys.
Yeah.
Like at this point, it's such a waste to not run surveys, because there's so much we can learn about trends and about our audience that really can really like help us make decisions in the future about what products we offer, what topics we cover, all these different aspects of our show.
Yeah, I would just say if you start earlier, you'll have that experience under you and like you'll have the processes in place. It's sort of similar to the sales funnel where if you started earlier, you'll know, okay, well, when I get these answers, this is how I can actually sort them to utilize them to the best degree possible. Because it might be that you have a Google form and people fill out the information, but then if you don't start thinking about, well, where can I put that information and how can I store it in the best way, you'll start to get a lot of answers and you'll get overwhelmed and you won't actually know what to do with it. So I'd always say start practicing that earlier rather than later. So section 3, which is 5 to 10,000 viewers per episode, is all about diversifying and testing scalable income. This is all about starting to work with advertisers who are a good match for your audience. And one thing that you want to keep in mind is that this is still a growth stage. So it's important to not utilize too many advertisers. I know it's hard to hold back if people are trying to offer you money. It's hard not to just grab that bag. But
Really hard.
but you don't want to stagnate your growth, because if you start using like 3, 5 advertisers at the start of your show and you suddenly go from having 1 ad spot of 30 seconds to 3 to 5 minutes of advertising space at the start of your episode, you're going to lose long-time fans and you're going to not gain any new term fans. So it's a huge hit that you could do to your long-term growth and that long-term money, which is way more valuable than this short-term money.
Yeah, we all put a lot of work into making sure that our podcast episodes have momentum, that we're pulling people through the whole episode, that we're getting that watch time up, and putting in these ads throughout the episode is really like putting in little roadblocks that just like suddenly kill the momentum. And you want to make sure that whenever you are making the choice to kill that momentum, that you're doing it for a good reason.
Yeah. So that being said, get that bag a little bit,
Yeah,
though,
definitely.
right? Like
we need to make some money.
This is a time where it's really exciting because you get to start bringing in those sponsors. And, we just put out another video, which you can find on our channel, which takes you through finding that first sponsor. It goes through from day 1 to day 30. So I highly recommend checking that out. You can see it right up here or in the description. But when you're finding that first sponsor, one thing that you really want to be looking out for is how they fit with your audience, because especially at this stage, you want to be offering really cool stuff that feels like it's a great fit. It's all about continuing to add that value. Sponsorships should provide value to your audience. And the best way that you can do that is by testing and figuring out, asking your audience with those surveys what types of products or services they use. Because if they all respond that, hey, they really love, let's say you're like a sleeping based channel and they're like, man, I love this pillow. This is like the best pillow. And then you can go and get them a 20% discount on that pillow. Like that's super sick for them. They're going to be really happy about that. And it's going to be a great product fit. If you instead were like, hey, here's this energy drink, and it's like, well, that doesn't help me sleep. Like I don't get the appeal here. Like that's going to turn people off to it. So it's all about finding that right product fit early on.
And if anybody needs recommendations for pillows or energy drinks, leave a comment below because I've got quite a few.
Yeah, that's true.
And then the other aspect of this is that at this stage, when we're beginning to make these advertiser relationships and we're building these relationships, we want to make sure that we're making these advertisers really happy, that they're getting good results from advertising with us, because that's really what they're paying for. They're not just paying for the spot to air, they're paying for these spots to actually convert into sales. So if you have too many advertisements in your episode, we're giving too many call to actions to people. People have to choose probably just one, maybe two things they're going to respond to in your episode.
Yeah.
They're not going to respond to all 3 or 4. So we want to be making sure that at this early stage, our advertisers are thrilled with us and getting good results. So making sure that we're trying really hard on these ad reads, we're being a real partner with our advertisers, that we're adding creative, we're not just taking what they're doing and just, phoning it in. This is a time to really prove to advertisers that you are a partner and that you can give them fantastic results if they keep advertising with you. And then they're gonna want to stick with you as you grow to the other stages.
Yeah, and one of the things that I want to throw out here, which was I was at Podcast Movement recently, and I was talking with a lot of different agencies like Silk Road and Podscale and different ones like that. And one of the things that they kept coming back to was, especially at this early stage, copy is so important. It's one of the biggest things that you can focus on, because oftentimes the advertiser, they're going to look to you to be able to resonate with your audience. They're going to give you a call to action. They might give you like some bits and tidbits that they want you to talk about, but you really need to be thinking about yourself not as just like a vehicle or a voice for them to say their thing, but instead that you are a partner within selling this product, which is why you need to make sure that it's a good product fit and that it's something you believe in, because you need to be able to talk passionately about it. But one of the things I recommend right at the start is when you're first having that conversation with the sponsor, be thinking about the ways that you can bring value to this ad read, whether that's making sure, I'll go back to Kill Count as an example. With their ad reads, they always make it sort of like a horror short where they bring in, they were doing American Werewolf in London, and for that one, it was like one of the people was turning into a werewolf and they were talking about Harry's razors or something like that. And so it was like, oh, well, a werewolf having to shave themselves. And like, because you're watching these people who you already enjoy goof off about a werewolf thing, you're way more likely to watch through that ad spot than if it was just a normal ad read where they're just talking about it. So you want to be thinking about how you can add value. Number one, that'll help you raise your CPM, but also it'll make sure that the sponsor understands you as an actual individual who they want to continue to work with and build a relationship with. The people who they inevitably cut ties with are the ones who don't convert and that they don't really have any type of good positive relationship with. It's so much easier to just say goodbye to somebody who you message over email and you don't really know them versus somebody who it's like, hey man, that's Michael. I like Michael. He's constantly coming up with weird, cool ideas. Let's give it another go. Let's see what's going on here. Let's see how we can make it work.
Yeah, but who doesn't like Michael?
Very egotistical, but true. I like Michael, so he can stay.
Another good example of a podcast that's very additive with their creative to their ads is My Brother and Me. Mm-hmm. Their ads are so entertaining to listen to. I like they're like the only podcast I never skip the ads on their podcast.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's important. It's a really valuable thing. And like, oftentimes there's not too many things you can learn from the big shows. This is a thing you can really learn from that big show, which is
Yes.
that they know how to do their sponsorships well.
You need to make it so that people don't want to skip your ads.
Yeah.
If your ads feel like an ad and people go, I want to get back to the podcast episode, you failed.
Well, and I think it's about looking at it the right way, because I think a lot of the times podcasters will look at sponsorships as a necessary evil,
Mm-hmm.
and sure, they kind of can be that if like that's how you, but that's how you want to look at it. If instead you really make sure that it's people who you believe in their product. And I know when you're first starting out, you want to go with like the people who offer you money. So I totally get that you want to take that money, but if you can just hold off from doing that, instead find and reach out to those people who you can speak passionately about, you're going to have such a better conversion rate, and you're going to have a lot more fun making those advertisements because, number one, if you can go get free product, like, look, anytime Patagonia wants me to be a sponsor, I'll talk about Patagonia all day because I would love to have their jackets. Their jackets are incredible. I'm happy to do it. See, I'm spending time on this podcast talking about it, and I'm not even sponsored by them.
If you give it away for free, they're not going to send you a jacket.
They should. They just should. You should, whatever. If you have the energy to just talk about something, whether they sponsor you or not, that's probably a good person to go and get a sponsorship from. And they will pay you. Even if you talk about it for free before that and you just keep putting on a pressure campaign of, hey, sponsor me, they're going to end up sponsoring you because it's worthwhile to have people who they can build that relationship with. It's so valuable to them.
And then besides working with advertisers, the other thing we can be doing at this stage of the growth timeline is launching a paid offering of our own, some sort of mini course or a digital product, and making sure that we don't make this product too massive. Because if you make a very high ticket item, like something very expensive that takes you just a ton of effort to create, then you are taking a big gamble at this stage because you only know so much about your audience and where your audience is going. So we can get a lot of data by who is interested in this product that we have, what problems we can solve for our audience, and whether or not they actually will buy this product from us. Because if someone will buy a $100 product from you, then chances are in the future you can find ways to sell a good portion of those people a $500 product and a $1,000 product.
Yep, absolutely. One of the ways I like to think about this is don't make the product, make your first product.
Yeah.
Because if you do that, if you test it, if you come up with, because you can spend a lot of time making one thing, or you can spend a lot of time making several things. And at this stage, honestly, making several things is more popular or is more valuable because you could make merchandise, you could make an online course, you could make a newsletter course, you could do all types of things, and then you can go and you can get real data about which ones people resonate with and purchase and which ones they don't. And then that'll help you in the next stages of the timeline where you want to build out that larger product because you already have a lot of data backing up making that.
And another really powerful thing we can be doing right now with this smaller paid offering is any weeks for our podcast that we don't have an advertising sponsor, we can do our own ad spot for our product. So even though we don't have an advertising sponsor, that doesn't mean that episode of the podcast won't generate revenue. We have our own way to generate revenue by advertising our own product.
Yeah, I think Mike Israetel is a really good example of this. Every time his advertisements come in, they always feel really like seamless in the way that they're instituted into the episode. They're always like 15 seconds for his apps and stuff, but like they're just really effective and they're really quick and straight to the point.
And the second to last stage of our monetization timeline is 10,000 to 20,000 viewers. And at this point, our focus is starting to bring in a lot more ad revenue and premium offers to our audience. So at this stage, we can start working with more advertisers at a time. We don't need to be as focused about like keeping it really specific because we have a much larger audience. This larger audience is going to have a little bit more diversity with their views and what they want.
Mhm.
and the problems that they have, so we can offer them a few other options and still be driving enough traffic to each of these advertisers to support all of their ad spend.
Yeah, so at this point, a standard ad load would look like 3 to 4 ads per episode. That's a pre-roll ad, 2 mid-roll ads, and a post-roll ad, which means that you have a lot of emphasis on making sure that people are getting through the entire episode. That's really one thing that you have to focus on, especially if you're selling those post-roll ads, is making sure that people are really still there. And one of the things that will inevitably happen is that you're going to sell a pre-roll or even the first spot in your mid-rolls at a higher CPM than you're going to for your second mid-roll or your post-roll. That's just kind of standard practice, and it's a best practice because, let's be honest, way less people are going to listen to a post-roll than a pre-roll. Another thing that you can look at this point is brand partnerships. And so those are really cool because they're long term investments in your show. And also, typically, you get a lot of that money up top, which is a nice thing when you want to be cash flush versus what ends up happening a lot of the times, which is that you're barely making it minute to minute on a show, especially at those earlier stages. So this is where you can start to bring in those brand partnerships, which would be bundling your podcast and YouTube and newsletter promotion into individual packages. You can also include social media in there, of course.
And you can also consider things like naming your studio where you film your podcast after a brand. You can have different segments of your show be named after brands. There's lots of different ways to integrate a brand into your show without it being like disruptive to everything else.
Yeah, a fun example of this, which maybe fun is too strong of a word, but Dave Ramsey, his studio is named after
Pods moving in storage.
Yeah, right. Pods moving and storage. So, you can always get creative with it. And you should get creative with the different ways that you do it and make sure that, they feel fluid and all of those things that we kind of talked about in the earlier sections.
And speaking of getting creative in branding, you can start launching merch for your show at this point. So we
Mhm.
can actually be launching shirts, hoodies, posters.
Yeah, and maybe you dabbled in it in the earlier ones, but this is where you get an actual store set up like Shopify or things like that, where you're actually putting a lot of effort into making sure that you have merch drops, things like that that can drive revenue.
And then lastly, this is where we can actually start launching larger product offerings. We've learned a lot about our audience. We've grown an audience. It's diverse. We have lots of data to make decisions about. So now is the time that we can figure out some sort of high ticket product that we can sell to our audience and develop that out and really take our time to make something that's going to really stand out in the market.
Yeah, and we've tested smaller products, so like for courses as an example, you have all these mini courses. Well, it's time to make that big course that you're going to be selling as like a larger membership. And finally, 20,000 plus viewers per episode. This is when things get, they've been sweet, but this is where they get really sick, because this is where you get high ticket offers like, group programs, masterminds, retreats, linked to the podcast content, live shows. You get big merchandise drops that sell out really quickly. You have branded content. I mean, the list really goes on at this point because this is where that hub and spoke model of making money turns into a huge web because you have so many different ways that you can really maximize your revenue.
And if we've been really diligent through all the other stages of the timeline and really collected that data, tested the market, we truly understand who our audience is and which advertisers they really are resonating with, there's so much power that we have at this stage to really make decisions that are going to just astronomically skyrocket our revenue and our potential to grow this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. This year, Linus Tech Tips put out their report on, the different revenue structures that they have and like what and how much, they're making from each area. And I think it's something that's worth watching through because what you notice is that sponsorships is a portion of it, but it is not the biggest portion. You have their merch store, you have all of the different things that they sell, they have their community features, all of those types of things built out. I think that that's just a really good model goal to be aspiring to, because you want to be making sure that you are constantly building out that whole sales funnel so that you are really able to take advantage when you get to this stage.
Yeah, and especially because you don't have control over the advertising market. You
Mhm.
can you can work with what's there and make great decisions and like have a lot of success with that, but sometimes the advertising market just really slows down. There are
Yeah.
certain periods that the economy changes, and if you don't have other forms of revenue, that's when you're going to suddenly be in a huge problem. So you want to make sure you've done all these earlier steps, you've diversified your audience, you have them in different places, you can communicate with them in different ways, they're engaging with your own offerings, and you have lots of data to make decisions about, and you're not just relying on one single source of income. So that is the monetization timeline, taking you from 0 views all the way to 20,000 plus views, and exactly what you should be doing at each step to make sure that you are succeeding and growing revenue for your podcast.
This is a new channel, so make sure that you're, putting a like if you found some content that was actually valuable here. Subscribe if you want to learn more. We definitely want to keep growing this. So if you have questions or need support on your own podcast, make sure that you put questions in the comments. We are absolutely going to do grab bags on them. We're going to go through. We could even create a video all about the subject that you have a question about. So we really want to make sure that this is a place to support you.
And if you want to download a PDF of the monetization timeline, go ahead and grab that. It's in the links below. All you have to do is sign up for the newsletter and you'll get a free copy sent to you right away.
That's us doing our own sales funnel. There you go, folks.